Good evening, everyone. This is Tauzer here. Can everyone hear me fine? All right, I'll assume so. And if you have any comments, sound has not yet started. Well, it should have by now. Yeah, okay, there you go. All right, there's a bunch of people saying it has started. Good. All right, so the purpose of this webinar, um, we decided to have a couple of webinars. Mike held the first one, and after the results, there were a lot of challenges for students, and there was deciphering your results, and why did I fail? I failed up this level. I didn't get depth. There's a whole slew of different concerns for different levels of students, and what went wrong, where, why, and it's very difficult to kind of individually talk to a lot of students. And so what we decided is, why not have a webinar, try and explain explain some of our main themes that we tend to focus on when we help students. And this also applies to first-time students in many cases. And so this is what we wanted to present. This webinar, I will say right off the bat, is going to be a little more technical than um, the first one that Mike had. So you need to be a little more awake for this one. All right. Just a little bit of background on myself. I've been doing this for a while. I worked at E&Y for several years, and I've helped tons of repeat writers at Ernst & Young in our Toronto office. And I've always had a passion for this. I was taught by one of the best. I still believe in their philosophy, and some of that I will share with you today. Again, part of why PrepFormula is a key is I am involved with PrepFormula. Some of the things that we would like to share with you is it's a one-on-one program specifically designed to help the student and cater to the individual needs. Also, you get a tax deductible receipt. And as of 2014, we had an 89% pass rate. The subsequent to the 2015 CFE, it has been very difficult to kind of disclose the pass rates. So we cannot just come out and say this is a pass rate, because they do day one separate from day two, day three, and different people can skew it differently. Okay. And as of October, we are one of the largest, and people seem to really kind of trust and have faith in our program, as we have a core group of trainers who go out of the way to support the students. I'd like to declare off the bat that the below are basically my interpretations. Some of the material is obviously derived from CPA Canada, and I've kind of worked around it to demonstrate what I think are the skills that are already present in you. And then on the other side, from my side or the trainer side, we have the tools available to help you. And together, if we meet in the middle, we can work on this together to help you each individually to succeed on this exam. Okay, so again, I'm going to focus a lot on the board's comments directly and kind of try and tie them back to how it applies to your studying. And my focus is generally going to be on day 2 and day 3. And as you go, okay, can you retype your question, Rajinder? How big is the class size? There is no class size as such. It's always a one-on-one that you work with with students. Okay, the webinars that we do are done for how many people, but when you're working, when you actually enroll and you work with people, you're working with an individual who works with you one on one because your needs are unique. Okay. So the whole goal, I mean, if you look at it top down or whatever, is the idea is to test you from a technical perspective, your technical knowledge, and then assigning a role. They want to see if you can interpret the case facts that they're giving you. That's an absolute key. And tell us how the user is going to solve whatever is required, your assessment opportunities, essentially. Okay. And can you meet the user objectives? So just by telling you that, yes, you will be provided by this of the presentation. So just by that, you should kind of pick up on this that technical is an absolute key. And then the second part is your user role and user and the objectives. These are absolutely fundamental to your success on the exam. If you do not cannot do this, I will just say straight out, you're at a massive disadvantage. But if you keep this framework in mind and you work, and that's what I do. I mean, when I mark an exam or a case, that is what I'm focusing on. Did the student pick up on this? If they did not, why did they not? And how can I help them work towards that? You will not in the beginning. It's a 9 month journey or 8 month journey, depending on what stage you are in your preparation. But as yeah, I mean, yes, it's a day one writer also. I mean, it's the same thing. It's a case writing skill. So what kind of technical you're applying it to, it doesn't matter. Okay, Deep. So that should this is fundamental case writing that I'm talking about at the end of the day. The only difference is that since they merged the three legacy programs, they are focusing day one more on kind of the CMA style, day two and day three more on a blend of CA, CGA style. Okay. So that's the only difference. So now, using those above three criteria, the board of examiners is going to repeatedly create various scenarios, whatever those scenarios are. And they're going to repeatedly ask and expect you to apply your technical knowledge, okay, to come up with a reasonable response. So technical knowledge followed by the application, and the application to help the user solve their problem, which is a user objective. Were you able to do that? And if you are able to do that, then guess what? You accomplished a competent in the assessment opportunity. I know it sounds simple because, I mean, okay, I don't mean to minimize anybody's efforts, but I've seen this several times. So it's easy for me to say, but that's what it is. And to me, it has become over the years basically a game or a pattern. Okay. When I wrote, which was a long time ago, I did not really see this. I only saw it to a certain extent. But believe me, if you figure this out, if you work on this, and then you see these patterns, whatever in the questions that are given on the exam, if you see it even half the time and you're able to get that and you're able to answer it in the fashion that they want you to, even half of the time, you're just laughing. You're home free. You're basically home free. Okay. So now, how do you go about preparing for this exam? Okay. How do you examine, track, and utilize the so-called whatever method that I'm talking about? Okay. So how does this help us in understand or help you prepare for the exam? That's where our role comes in. Okay. And that's where if you go back to the last few board of examiner or evaluators reports, you will see in their comments, you will see a consistent theme of they will talk about time management. They have basically they talk about them under different headings. Time management, fundamentally the same thing. They will talk about technical weaknesses, fundamentally the same thing. case writing weaknesses, basically the same type of case writing weaknesses. Quants, same type of quant weaknesses. And that we will talk about that a little later, because what I have done is I've taken the 2015 CFE report and some of the comments from the 2016, and I'm going to illustrate that over here with that. Okay. So once people like myself and Mike, and I mean, and there are other people out there, we start seeing these patterns, then we ourselves know, once I read a question, I can understand what they're driving at, what they want you to get to. So when I'm marking your case, I have the advantage of actually seeing that and helping you build towards that strength of how do you get there. So now I am created an advantage for myself as a trainer, and I want to pass that knowledge on to you. What is the best? Okay, so now, no, the September CFE report is not out yet. It'll be out in May. So I'm focusing on the comments from the May and last September's. Okay. I don't even think the questions are public yet, are like publicly disseminated. All right. So with this knowledge, when we are working with a particular candidate, a lot of times I really want to first just, I mean, I honestly, if I look at your outline and I see how you have either outlined the case or even just developed your outline, highlighted your user role, whatever, I can clearly tell how you are going to end up doing on the case. I don't even need to read your solution. And so that is the first most critical step. Once you understand that, the rest is basically the nitty gritty that you're going to fill in. That's the easy part. Okay. It's getting to that easy part that takes a lot of practice, because there are a lot of scenarios and things like that. And I'll get to that in 1 second on the slide itself. And so that's where our debriefing technique comes in. So once you write the case and I mark it, let's say, and individually, each one of you has a different, strengths and weaknesses. Believe me, all of y'all have a lot of strengths. Okay. Even those that have failed, like one thing I want to say very, very clearly, I had some of my students who failed. And even though you failed, look at it as that failure as like a big stepping stone towards success. Everybody doesn't pass on the first try. But the fact that a lot of y'all, had very poor case writing skills, or had no time or full-time working, all of those factors, and yet you went so far, and a lot of people passed level 2, level 3, level 4, whatever, just missed a couple of levels. It is a big achievement. Look at it that way. Okay. Look at the positives that you have achieved, and then what else do I need to achieve to get the rest of the hurdle. So now with this knowledge, okay, in my debrief, I can actually help you and see this is actually how you were supposed to read the case, figure it out. This is what they were trying to actually get you to do. So now, if I know what the end game is, well, I'm just using those kind of terms, but if I know what they want you, what the AO conclusions they want you to put out there, then I can really help you on an either individual basis, and most of the time it has to be individual basis, especially for second time writers. Okay. And that is why working one-on-one is the best thing. Because sitting there in a classroom of 100 people and trying to debrief a case, to me, it had no value. When I wrote, even though I had the best instructor, to me, it had really no value. I went through the Ernst& Young program, and in Toronto, we had all Ontario students get together, 150 of us. It really had no value. So it has to be that one-on-one. Like, these are the specific strengths and weaknesses. This is what you're seeing. This is what you're not seeing. That is my job as your trainer. Okay, think of it here, and that's the benefit of me having, or people like Mike or whoever else, and there are other people out there are lots of good people out there, of having reviewed the board report. There's a reason why the board puts these out. Okay, think of it this way, that I'm asking you to go through a maze. Okay, Harry, why don't you just hold on with your question towards the end for the decile, okay? Day one weakness, okay, well, we can talk about that at the end. Let me get to this one point. Think about it this way, that you are going and writing a case. And basically, the case is a maze. You know, these patterns you get in these puzzle books that we normally give to kids to do or whatever. And you got to start at one point and you got to find the center. And the center is basically your answer. Okay. Now, just imagine that you're outdoors and there's this big playground maze and the wall is 8 feet tall. You have no idea how you're going to navigate through that. Now, the CFE board has about 20 or so of these mazes up their sleeves, or scenarios of these mazes that they can throw at you. And sometimes there are slight variations of that. Now, can you hear me, Stephen? Okay. So if I am looking at this maze from a 25-foot level, if I've been looking at all of the previous exams from that level consistently, I have a very good idea of their mindset in drawing out these mazes or scenarios. Whereas you got no clue. You have the tools, you may have the technical knowledge how to do the quants. You may also have some ideas about, okay, I do the technical, then I got to tie it into the case writing, conclusions, blah blah blah. But the higher level stuff, you may not have an idea until I get you on track. Once I get you on track, then you don't really need, then once you figure out that particular aspect of it, once you figure out how to play this pattern or play this game, then you can start doing your own debriefing. That's why a lot of the good students we have, okay, a lot of the good students, at least a lot of the students I had for the May and September exam, a lot of them, I would say at least minimum, well, 75% of them, and who had worked throughout the year, they did not need to debrief, because this is what I had kept telling them from the beginning of the year. And this is what I would keep commenting on when I marked their papers. So there's no point in me repeating myself and spending their time and money. So I that's what somebody can provide for you, that view. And that's the analogy I can give you guys. Okay. I'm trying to go at a slightly slower pace so you guys can kind of, you know, see what I'm trying to get at. Um, and what are the key success factors to passing the UFE? Understanding these patterns, we talked about it. Technical knowledge. Um, And I will talk a little bit more about technical knowledge because the board made specific comments about technical knowledge and case writing. And under case writing support, there is the case writing aspect. And what I'm talking about the case writing support is at some stage, you need that one on one. Okay. Even at Ernst and Young, when I was in charge of the UFI program, towards the end, I had people's, I did not have, I had actually every student get a shot with a UFI marker for a minimum of one on one. That's all the firm could afford. And in some cases, two. And the repeat writer is a minimum of two to three, because that is the key. Somebody sits down with you or on Skype or whatever and actually walks you through your fundamental weaknesses. And the earlier they do it with you in the process, the faster you get on the right track. And believe me, once it clicks, these things just start to roll. Okay. The fourth one is a consistent market feedback. You have to give a lot of feedback. Why did you go wrong? What do you need to pay attention to? You know, enforce is extremely key to be positive. You know, what were the good things? It doesn't matter how, this might be your first case. There's always something good you can find in that person's first case. And then what can you work on? What can you improve upon? And then the next big thing is debriefing. And towards the end of the webinar, I will talk a little bit about debriefing and how debriefing is tied to the success factors, which also are, the big picture stuff. And then 6 and 7 comes a lot from your end. And then the support experience is obviously from your work related, and support is, family support from your trainers, from people at work, and things like that. Okay. So at the end of it, we go through a lot of trouble of discussing these things at prep and trying to focus on this. And we know that these are the key success factors for case writing and also technical. Just knowing technical is not enough. Believe me. And I will demonstrate that as we go along. Okay. The key is, when do you need to apply that technical? Now, again, I said each candidate has their own strengths and weaknesses. And why does a templated approach not work? In the past, when you had the CA exam, it was straightforward. The four regions had their own 4 exams, and you had the UFI at the end. But it was, whether you were in a big firm or small firm, everybody went through like herds. Everything was standardized, boom, 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 templated, everything like that. Study programs, you were given 4 weeks off at the end. This is the way you studied. You practiced the last 4 years of exam, all of that. Now it's completely changed. The whole dynamic has changed. There are people that are working, there's international students, there's legacy students, there's all sorts of, and at prep, we specialize in dealing with the non-big four to a large extent. They are the ones that have the biggest challenges. Believe me, I would love to write a blog about that, because I'm not at all happy about how the transition was handled. It has been significantly um, unfair to the international students and legacy students, but that's my beef. The whole point is this, that today, with all of these things, you have to be able to work with somebody who can sit down and say, okay, these are the pros, these are the cons, let us deal with those. Let us come up with a program, or your particular program that will help you through that. Now, again, mind you, somebody one cannot work magic. You cannot come to me September exam. You cannot come to me in July, especially when you have to do capstone 1 and capstone 2 as a first time writer, and expect me to help you pass. Chances are that's not going to happen. It's going to be very, very difficult. The process has to start in January. That doesn't mean you have to start going hardcore in January as a repeat writer also. I'm saying the process. You have to start that examination process of, what went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Let me start the planning for 2017. Okay? So using a standard templated approach, whether it's in your answers or whether it's in your general studying, is going to lead to failure. I don't like to use a failure. I just like to lead to a non-positive outcome. Okay? So like I said, I have to take into account a whole slew of things: language, age, industry, technical knowledge. When you're coming from another country, there are a lot of incredibly smart people from overseas, but they don't have the Canadian tax knowledge, for example. They need time to get acquainted to that. They don't have the case writing techniques that are taught in Canada. The US CPAs don't. You know, also students from outside public accounting have a handicap in that they don't have a lot of financial reporting or maybe assurance practice. People from small firms, it's different for them. That's why I say a templated approach does not work. Deep English as a second language will have a disadvantage on any day. I mean, I'm assuming you've just by your last 2 or 3 questions, you might have been somebody who failed day one and passed day two or in day three. Um, but that's just probably a case of, you just fared better on day two and day three. Uh, Language is because it's not about just communication. You don't need to be, a A-level student in English to do well on the exam. As long as I can understand what you're putting across in your paper, you will get credit for it. That's what I tell my students. Okay? It's that simple. So if you feel like language is an issue, just have somebody else read what you're writing and ask them, do you understand what I'm writing here? Plain and simple. Yeah. Okay. So don't take it that language was it for you, Deep. Okay. There could be a lot of other, there could be other, it just could be that it was that particular exam that was not suited for you if it was day one. So again, these different groups have technical needs like I described. Okay. So I cannot just hand off the material to you and say, go study for it. And that's what a lot of places will do. Here's a book with all the technical, go and study. A lot of times different students call me and say, well, you know what? Like sometimes even the stuff we have on our prep website, a lot of people say, well, you know what? I have no tax experience. I need more tax help, more tax notes. And so we find them more tax in-depth notes to study. We have webinars on tax, or they need help with specific things like, audit procedures or things in assurance or financial reporting. So we do stuff like that, which goes into either more depth and things like that. Okay. And that is why the role of the educators has become challenging in technical areas, because you do not have the 250 hours that a lot of students need to learn all the technical. You're working, busy season is coming up for a lot of people, whether it's industry or not. You're not going to get time off in the summer. If you're a first time writer, you're doing Cap 1, Cap 2. Even if you're a second time writer, you're still going to be studying a lot. Okay. And also the second thing that we can provide at prep or as educators in general is I should be able to help you narrow down topics, say in FR or assurance, of what is commonly tested. And that generally comes out from reading a lot of the board reports or seeing a lot of the questions over the years. And so that's what I just talked about here is you want a way to cut those hours in half. So what should I focus on in my technical? Okay? And that's what you should be able to get out of your tutor or whoever is helping you. And you don't get it out of them right away. It's like it's a game where you get a feel of it. You start studying and then you kind of see, okay, you know what? Yes, I need more information in this area or that area. And then they should be able to bounce back and say, okay, here are some of the resources for that particular individual. But if you really look at it at the core of it, there are some topics, and you guys know that things like in financial reporting, rev rec, inventory, PPE, those kind of topics will keep coming up all the time on every exam. AR, stuff like that. Same thing with assurance, audit procedures, materiality, risks, those kind of things. So you need to focus more time on that and less time on the less tested areas. So on the next few slides, I'm going to talk about the board report. Okay. So the board starts off. So now these are excerpts. All right. So I've taken some of the comments on the board report because if I talk through the whole board report, we're going to be here for a while. But in communication, the exception often was that your quants, you do not explain your analysis. So fundamental things is assumptions. Okay. You do your quants in Excel, you have to do your assumptions with that and document why are you doing that. You do not expect me to go and click on the cell and try to figure out that you did, this number times 15% divided by 12 months. No, you need to put a note to explain that. That's where it says, yeah, others embedded their adjustments within a cell and did not make a reference. Because a CFE marker will mark your day 3 case in about 8 to 9 minutes max. And they will mark your day 2 case in probably less than half an hour tops. When I mark a day 2 case for my students, because I'm giving them a lot of feedback, it takes me a minimum of 2 hours. But just imagine, in half an hour, they barrel through. Because all they're going to do is they have this computerized check sheet, boom, 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 tick, 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 on a detail marking guide. Okay? So my whole point is you need to show your work in your quants. Now here, this is a much bigger piece. In many cases, it was difficult to decipher what candidates' calculations were intended to do. So clearly label and explain calculations. Now I want you to take it a step further. Okay? This is, people say, tell me what the purpose and conclusion is. And don't tell me the purpose is to do cash flow and conclusion cash flow is positive. Sorry, that doesn't tell me squat. Okay? If your requirement was, do I have your user says to you, can you tell me if my cash flow is positive for the last 2 years, and it's correct to generate X dollars so I can pay off a loan at the end of the second year, you need to do a 2 year cash flow, making the adjustments that are required for the errors that you see in the case, given case facts, and then coming up with two numbers at the end in two columns for 2 years, and then concluding clearly and telling me, think about it this way, that I am presenting this to you, and you need to give this to the bank to get to pay off the loan, to prove that you can pay off the loan. And people will repeatedly not put a purpose and conclusion. And there's another big advantage to doing that. So now if you do that, so now what, so you think about it. So now when I start doing the quant, what do I say to myself? Let me write a purpose. So what is my purpose? My purpose is, before I do the quant, I'm writing this down at the top. The purpose of the quant is to do a 2 year cash flow, making the necessary adjustments to ensure the cash flow meets whatever X threshold in order so that you can pay off your bank loan. So now think about it this way, that my purpose has clearly stated to me that I'm doing the right quant also. So it served a twofold purpose. Do you get that? And that is what I tell students. It's not just to tell the marker what you're doing, to get, so that they check off a box on the marking guide that, yes, you put down a purpose. No, this is to ensure you are doing. Yes, that would be the conclusion, can go in your Word document. And people debate that. Generally, what you do is you do your quant in there. But what I'm trying to explain to you is, as long as you have that thought process in your head, Stephen, okay, that this is what the purpose is, I don't care where you're putting it. As long as you make it absolutely clear that this is why you're doing it, then you are going to end up doing the right quant, which means you're on the right track. And then there, you're done. You're guaranteed to do the right quant and get a C on it. So that is what I pull out of the board report. And that is what I see when students do that. And people, however many times I'll tell them, they will repeatedly not do that. Again, now we're talking about the cut and paste function. Okay? People use the cut and paste function. There's a reason why they do that. Think about it. Remember I said earlier, the technical knowledge? Yes. So think about it. Think about certain handbook sections. So first of all, one basic thing is they say people cut and paste without actually applying it. That's the one fundamental thing. So if you're talking about R&D, you have the 6 criteria. You got to put down yes, met, not met, and why, right? And then at the end you conclude, yes, can be capitalized, or no, it can't be, blah, blah, blah. And then you move on. But the second aspect of it also is that it basically then it helps you tie it into your overall conclusion and user objective. Now, sometimes people are stressed for time. Okay, so I wanted to just kind of give you a little bit of a throw in an example here. If you had to do a cash flow, and there were 2 FR issues on there. One was inventory and one was R&D. Okay. But if you did not know that you're actually you're actually focusing on the cash flow, then if you pick on the inventory has no effect on cash flow. So if I had to choose between one of the two FR issues to talk about, and you picked on inventory, you picked the wrong one. But if you knew it had to do with cash flow, you'd probably go with R&D, even though R&D is going to take you a lot longer to do. And then you can flip it around in another situation. So again, knowing what you're doing and why you're doing can make a difference. So there will be times when you're crunched for time and you have to choose, okay, you know what? I can either do this issue or this issue. And guess what? If I have to do an inventory discussion or if I have to do an R&D, I am going to try to run towards inventory because it's a lot shorter. But if it's going to have no impact to the user, it's going to be worth nothing. Whereas in another scenario, the R&D may not have much of an impact and the inventory may be key. So again, knowing the user objective, your role, the case facts, that is key. That's how it plays in there. Okay. And that's how you interpret the board report. Not you. That's my job to interpret the board report and help you review the case as you're doing the cases. Okay. How to use board, some of the board comments. Now, this is specific from 2015. Okay. They said many candidates gave advice on whether they should go um, going public or what they should do following the IPO. Whereas they were specifically asked to discuss the IPO. Now we know on day two, everything is directed. But also on day three, there are some undirected topics. So again, the whole point is stay on track. Even just because you may not know what is the auditor's role in an IPO, if you don't know it, guess what? Move on. Spend time somewhere else. Norman, your dollar amount is relevant. Yes, it is, because you need to make adjustments. And actually, I'll talk about that a little bit later. It is key because you need, those are the things where, those are the issues where they actually want you to make adjustments to financial statements. And then that's what drives assurance. Okay. So don't go about wasting time. Save time and say, okay, you know what? This EO is gone. I just don't, either I don't know, or ask yourself this simple question. And, you know, I don't know how much you guys have been taught, but when we studied repeatedly, they reverted us back to section 1000 fundamentals. What does common sense dictate? So if you were an auditor, like I ran into that issue when people first wrote that case. When I first read it, you know, like I didn't know that the auditor's responsibility. So I just took a guess, you know. I said, well, I think there'd be like historical financial statement data, there'd be, you know, giving consent, blah, blah, blah. So I just came up with like 4 or 5 things. Okay, Stephen, you need to, okay, hold on. But that doesn't increase your risk of, well, if you don't know a particular AO, I'm talking about one odd one, because there will always be AOs in there that you don't know. I'm not saying skip 5 of them on a particular day. I'm talking about one odd one. You either don't know or you go back to section 1000, common sense. I'm not saying you don't have common sense. I'm just saying fundamentals. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Fundamentals. Okay. And Mary, it's, you know what? Some of these things are kind of unique. They will pull some of the, this is almost like, you know what? There's a vast array of technical out there, and you cannot cover everything. Okay. So they basically, a lot of times they want to see whether you can revert to section 1000. And what I'm, my second example here is actually more applicable to that. And that is, so I would just come on, rhyme off 4 or 5 things off the top of my head about IPO, spend like 3 or 4 minutes and move on. Do not talk about, whether you should do the IPO, should it, they are doing it. It's done, over with. They're not asking you that. Irrelevant. In 2016, there was an issue with contracts for discontinued business. People started talking about, okay, you know what? There's still another 2 years to go or whatever. So what kind of, is it a lease? No, you know what? Again, there may not be any specific technical to it, but again, they expected you to go back to basics and say that it's a basic fundamental liability. They did not expect you to know details of it. As long as you said it's a fundamental liability, we need to accrue for it, and this is how much we need to accrue for it, you were fine. Now, I don't know whether that got you to an RC or a C, but that's basically the direction they wanted you to head in. And that's what I want you guys to take out of this, to start thinking when you run into this. And you will run into it. However much you study, even for next year, this is going to come and hit you again. It'll hit me too if I were to do it tomorrow. Okay, on day 3, there was also evidence where candidates are trying to find home, blah, blah, blah commentary for something that was not suited to the role and required. Um, there was nothing in the simulation to lead candidates to a particular discussion. You need to keep their role in mind. Okay. And this comes into, yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm sure they probably had that. So they will always throw in certain things like that. And if you ask yourself, you know what, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I wouldn't know where to start looking for this. I would have to Google it myself. But I could go back to fundamentals and give you a reasonable answer. And that would be my starting point. So in 2016, there was an instance when the engagement again was accepted and the focus was on the work that had to be done, whether it was planning or doing preliminary assessment, doing some internal control work, whatever. Instead, students started to focus on giving reasons why it was risky. They will purposely tell you that it's risky. They will throw in case facts. You know, companies incurred losses for 3 years in a row, blah, blah, blah. But the partners accepted the engagement. You can't do anything about it. Move on. Go on to the planning phase. That's what they want you to do. That's where focusing on, your role. My role is to plan for the future. The required is the planning. The engagement has been accepted. It's the past. It's done and over with. That is not my job on this case. Regardless of the risks. But students look at it from templating. Another example I'll give you is you could have a case where you're at the start of an audit. And when you're at the start of an audit, you do your normal risk assessment, right? Risk, then you do your assessment, then you talk about materiality based on user needs. That's another thing that keeps coming up. People discussing materiality based on risk and not on user needs, which is more technical. And then they talk about particular procedures. But what happens, ramp, I don't like to really use the word ramp, but yes, essentially people use that acronym. But what what happens if I put you in a situation that says that here are we are, you know, today's Wednesday, Friday is a closing meeting. And this are the summary of audit differences we have found, or summary of errors, or whatever terminology people like to use. And I give you 3 or 4 issues. One AR particular error we found, one in inventory, one somewhere else. Say, well, the partner needs this information for the closing meeting. And how many times have I seen people start talking about the risk, or we should revise materiality because we found these other errors? No, all of that has been done. You've done all your procedures, you've done everything. You're at the end of it. Now focus on preparing that memo, the impact to the financial statements, whether it's material or not, impact to the audit report, or whatever you're required to do. From that point on, don't look at the past. Again, it's because your mind is templated on it for a lot of students. Okay. The other one, I'll try to go a little bit faster now. The other one was did not perform well on non-directed indicators. This is a big one. I know it's hard. It's a bit tricky. Um, I sometimes also fail to pick it up in spite having seen so many questions myself. And the challenge comes in for you guys is because you have to pass governance level 4. So you feel that, probably it's going to be on day 3, and maybe I'm going to get 2 governance EOs, and I want to try and get RC at least on both, just in case I didn't do one properly. So what happens a lot of times, you try and force it in there. Okay. But again, you can increase your chances. Now, this is kind of an iffy area. It's a more difficult, it's not straight cut like finance or tax. So it's understandable. But again, if you understand the user role, you can maybe 50% of the time prevent yourself from diverting into the SG&A discussion. Okay. There are hints in the case, like, they may talk about the mission of the company, the vision of the company, the vision of the board, or, the company is basically, the company is basically uh, kind of bio-friendly, environmentally friendly, and this blah, blah, blah. And now they're looking to expand, and the product line they're looking to expand is not environmentally friendly. Can kind of, that might end up being an AO indicator, big picture, where you talk about at the end. But you will see that in practice. But don't try and manufacture it when it's not there. The other thing that I want to talk about, simple thing again, that they brought up is audit reports. Okay? Or different reports, not necessarily audit reports, different reports. Now we get these different type of questions where they say, okay, what are the different options for reports? Um, And normally they want you to discuss at least two of them and give them an answer. The whole idea is, okay, you know what? Everybody has four or five, they've learned four or five of them. And you need to know at least fundamentally the key features of each one. Now, when you're applying it, again, think about it this way. I have seen so many answers. Well, the report whatever 8600 or report 5800, blah blah blah, whatever. Well, this is more. This will give you a little more assurance, but in this case, it's a lot cheaper. So go with that, even though the other one is clearly more suitable to the user. It clearly meets. If you had in one column what the report does and in one column what the user needs are, you would literally see a good match. Think about it that way. But yet some writers will pick the cheaper one because it's cheaper. But then I look at say and I said, well, you're talking about a $20 million investment. How much is the audit report? 5, 10 grand or whatever, and review report. So why would you even go and recommend it based on it on price versus value? So all that work you did, just your conclusion blew you right out of the water. And these are again, all of these things that I'm talking about are where we consistently see this, where we can consistently help you, where you write an answer where you don't know this. So you in your answer are going to write, and you're going to write this, based on dollar amount. And when I mark it, I'm going to clearly outline for you why you should have gone the other way, why it makes sense. I will tell you, tie it to the user, and you see the one-to-one value. Technical knowledge. Okay, so now there's a reason why they allow you to use case facts. Okay, and I'm going to kind of try and make this a little bit, go through this a little bit quicker. Just one second. I want to go forward here. Pa, 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 pa. All right. Okay. So fundamentally, somebody asked me, do we do number crunching? Okay. It is essential, okay, to always, whenever you're doing any analysis, you find an error, automatically ask yourself, let me write this down in a journal entry. So to correct this error, so if there's an inventory error, would I go, so if inventory is obsolete, I'll go debit inventory expense, 100,000, credit inventory, 100,000. So start getting yourself into that mode. So when you see an issue, you start making those journal entries at the end of the AO. So when they tell you in assurance, in your assurance indicator on day 2, make the adjustments to the financial statements, all you do is you pluck your adjusting journal entries and just put it into a column for that particular AO. Okay? And your entries have to balance. And always think about it, that like things that affect inventory can affect AR. So it's not just inventory. Always ask yourself, it's not just two items that are affected. It could be 4. AR can affect revenue, or when I make an adjustment to AR, or inventory can affect AR or revenue, things like that. So there could be more than 2 entries, because that is like a key, that is basically the key flow. I've actually written an article on my blog for the flow of the day 2 CFE case for 2015, the way they actually make that case flow and why they make it flow in a particular pattern, if somebody wants to look it up. Okay, so that's what I want you to think about when you're doing that, because that'll force you to start doing that and start calculating the right amounts. Then they talk about, some candidates easier. I mean, that's a natural tendency. You tend to go to some of the more comfortable topics, rather than going to do R&D. Okay. Um, thing that a lot of you have to know is, and again, this goes down again to thinking the journal entry mode, is why are they giving me, for example, for R&D? Okay. You discuss certain things. You said, okay, it qualifies for capitalization. But now we have to look at them and say that not all costs might be able to be capitalized. Some of them have to be expensed. So they will purposely give you 6 individual cost items, and you need to go through each one of them and determine whether they meet the criteria. Things like legal, things like marketing might be in there. So you got to say, no, marketing is not allowed. So that's where you have to apply case facts and apply the numbers. Okay, so you need to follow through on those kind of things. And then I already talked about materiality, discussed risk versus users. Okay, now here's a big one. Audit procedures guaranteed probably to show up on every exam. Okay, all of you all probably know your assertions. You know basic audit procedures. The whole key is you have to apply the audit procedures two ways. Number one, you will see they will first you're going to run into financial reporting problems. So you will see that, yes, accounts receivable has a problem, or inventory has a problem, or some kind of revenue stream has a problem, you know whatever. So now these are your problem areas. So I want you as an examiner to design specific procedures to address those. I do not care if you tell me how to, you know, uh, procedure for cash or for my investments. When, yeah, even though it's on the balance sheet, it's not a problem area. The main marks are in the marking guide, it'll clearly state, did the candidate discuss specific audit procedures to discuss, three, let's say, example, to get an RC, three relevant financial reporting problems, or to get a C, five relevant financial reporting problems specific to the case. And they have to be specific to the case. So, for example, if you told me revenue cannot be recognized in a particular situation, okay, because, um, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Revenue cannot be recognized, okay, because collection is not assured as one of the criteria. And now you're going to give me an audit procedure to ensure that I'm testing that phase. A lot of people will say, well, send out confirmations. That's a fundamental audit procedure for AR. And then you walk out of the exam thinking, wow, you know what? I discussed relevant audit procedures. And guess what? You did not. So you walk out of that thinking, yeah, I did good, but you did not. Because sending out a confirmation for collection is irrelevant. I can write back and say I owe you money, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to pay up. So you have to come up with another appropriate procedure for collection. You understand the difference there? So it has to be specific. But that only happens with practice. And that only happens when you're giving me an answer and I'm sitting there and basically highlighting there in your case and saying, you know, John or Fred or whoever, this is not appropriate, and giving an example of appropriate procedures. Okay, so really pay attention to this because audit procedures are really, really key. How to use board comments in future. Candidates sometimes struggle with technical quantitative analysis, management accounting requirements. Um, well, this is just purely technical knowledge, like ratio analysis, but they didn't know what to apply or how to calculate specific ratios or how to interpret ratios. Like a lot of times when again you got to realize, okay, if I'm doing like, okay, they'll give you 2015, 2016, okay, now they're going to give you, let's say, a current ratio. So common sense, not common sense, just like the way the board is going to design the exam means that if you're dealing with 2016, there will be problems in that year. Okay, if in 2015 the current ratio was 2, which means it's good, your assets are twice as much as your liabilities, and your bank loan requires it to be 1.7, let's say, and in 2016 it's actually, after your adjustments, it's come down to 1.5. Okay, a lot of people might switch it around, may make that error sometimes in Excel in a hurry, okay, or may come up with, even though they know that, yeah, there have been massive declines in whatever goes into that current ratio, there have been drops in assets or whatever, yet they come up with a current ratio of 2.5 all of a sudden. Stop and think for a second. That's what they talk about interpreting. Stop and think, given all of the stuff that I've already calculated or analyzed, does this make sense, the number I'm outputting? Do I have the years flipped around or do I have some numbers flipped around? People do it so often. It's amazing. I mean, not amazing. It's, and it's because you're crunched for time. It's not because you don't know how to do that. It's like you're just like blowing through it. And that's why it happens. Okay. And then the other part of it is, once you calculate it, tell me what is the impact of these newly calculated numbers after the adjustments on their objectives. Like I said, if your current ratio was supposed to be 1.5 to meet your bank loan and you came up with 1.3, now it has a whole bunch of, so now the bank can call the loan. Now that has an effect. So now this, it has a cascading effect. It has an effect on your audit report. It has an effect on the bank recalling the loan right away, a whole bunch of different things. You have to pay back that difference right away and bring back the current ratio back to 1.5. So it has multiple impacts, and you need to let the client know that. And that's what they mean by letting the user know that. Are you guys asleep or what? I haven't had any questions yet. Okay, other comments regarding that technical knowledge. Okay, now this one is interesting. Is candidates did not, and this goes back to my technical knowledge. Now, all of you, let's take revenue recognition. This is what I wanted to pick on. I had this discussion with one student yesterday, and we discussed this. And I said, a lot of times, you're technical. Okay. So if I asked you to rhyme off rev rec, you can rhyme it off. POC, percentage, you can rhyme it off, blah, blah, blah. But in a lot of situations, you don't know what technical to apply. or you apply the incorrect technical, or you don't apply any technical at all. Then in hindsight, when you look at the solution, you say, oh my God, I knew this technical. One very simple one is there was a 2015 case. Deep, it has to be a blend. You have to do technical. You have to have a reasonable base of technical and then do it with cases, because the cases will demonstrate to you how much in depth you need to know your technical and the variety and things like that. So it has to be a balance, because just doing technical first, you're going to get bored out of your mind. So it has to be a blend. So think about it. There was a 2015 question, and all it said was simply that they were doing something over a 4-month period. A lot of students said, well, revenue cannot be recognized, it's not completed, blah, blah, blah. Done. They walk out of the exam again thinking they nailed it. So recognize zero revenue. Whereas actually, you apply the POC method, you do certain calculations you had to do for 3 different products, and then you come up with a number. People did that, they got a C. So you see the difference? I'm sure all of you all know what POC, how to do the POC method. You just didn't think. And that's what they want you to do, apply the relevant technical. That is why they've actually given you access to a lot of the technical. They don't want you to memorize 6 criteria or all the criteria for assets held for sale. They want to know when you can apply it. And again, it's my job to tell you when you need to apply it if you don't know. Okay? Now, the other thing that I heard is that some people who fail level 2 and level 3, I think maybe this is only in BC, but correct me if I'm wrong. Apparently, CPA Canada is calling up people and saying, you fail FR or assurance or PM, whatever. Why don't you take the elective again, the assurance elective or the whatever PM elective or whatever it is again? That's not going to help you get depth. Doing those modules is not going to help you get depth. I'm not saying those modules are not good. The last thing I need is somebody from CPA Canada calling me. But what I'm saying is it's not going to help you get depth. What you need to learn if you are having trouble on level 2 and 3 is getting from RC to C. You're probably getting enough RCs, but you're just not getting enough Cs to get through level 2 and 3. Okay? And that's my job again. What did you need to do? What did you miss that stopped you at RC? What did you need to write? Or what extra case fact did you need to add to your analysis or put in there to get to C? Is that so? Well, I'm not saying it's simple, but when you think about it in hindsight, that's what you need to do. But that only comes with practice. Okay? And another thing we are trying at Prep is, you know how you get in the CFE reports or the old UFE ones or probably in Capstone too, you get the board has, for reaching competent, the candidate needed to provide a reasonable calculation of blah, blah, blah of the income statement or whatever. And then for a C, they'll just say a higher level. But having seen so many of these, having talked to some of the markers, having done this so many times, I have a good idea. So for example, I can look at a question and to a fairly accurate degree, I can say that, let us say they asked you to prepare, to do some kind of cost analysis, So to get an RC, I would say, okay, you need to include so many of the variable costs and so many of the fixed costs. And let us see, some of them were more important than others. So to get to a C, you needed to have so many more, or you needed to have the more important ones in the C, which was specifically, this cost or that cost or that cost. And you needed to have used, the proper 12-month or prorated variable cost to get to a C. That's what's going to help you. And that's what at Prep we're trying to develop over the next few months is for the 2015 CFE and the May 2016 CFE, try to come up with that. And maybe for a couple of, for the 2014 UFE and for some of our own questions for our students. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about debriefing. Now this is extremely important. Okay, just hold on with me for a little more time and then I will take all your questions or you can fire them away as we're going. The whole part of debriefing is at a high level is I got an NC. How do I improve my technical or in case writing to go to an RC at least? Or if I got an RC, how do I go to a C? And how do I get that big picture, user role objectives? Okay. So how well did I read the case to identify user role objectives, my technical knowledge, and how did I apply that? So that's 3 ABC. Okay. And when you're marking the cases, did I clearly identify the user role? That's the first thing. And that should be there on your outline, whether it's a paper or it's typed. Were there any indirect requirements? And did I support my analysis? And again, if you look at some of these things, they tie back to what we talked about on the board report. Okay. Quants. Remember we talked about the very first thing in quants. They said improper assumptions or did not use proper case facts. You want to make sure you do that. Purpose and conclusion. So basically, what I have actually done is I've created like probably a 3 or 4 page debriefing tip sheet for a lot of our students. Some follow it, some don't, because it's exhausting. I know it is. But as you get better, you need it less and less and less. But basically, you use it as a checklist after you do each case. Am I doing these things? And then the more you do them, the more you do them on cases, then the fewer of these you will have to apply. So here I've just probably listed 8 or 10. The checklist I have is probably about 30. Okay. And over here, I've kind of listed some of the ones that I did not talk about in the board report. Multiple issues within an indicator, ranking. That's another key one, right? Like when you're talking about controls. In a case, they may have 9 control issues. You want to pick again the 5 that are most relevant, that have the most impact to the user, to the case, to the problems that the user faces. Okay. Now here's a big one, the last one here. Are there specific type of scenarios that are in the cases, audit planning, advice, accounting policies? And as you're writing a case, okay, just try and at the end of each case have like your own kind of like a cheat sheet or whatever, like a 1-page summary. Here's where I had technical difficulties on this case. Here's where I had case writing. This is what like lessons learned, basically. Technical lessons learned, case writing lessons learned, other. Because think about it this way, over a given period of time, you're going to write 30, 40 cases. Closer to the exam, going to want to review, say the last 4 Fridays, people set aside a couple of hours every Friday to review through, the mistakes they've made and ensure that, they're just basically hammering home how to do things appropriately. I'm not going to go through the whole case again. If I go through that 1 page document that I prepared myself, which I understand clearly with my own writing, then it makes it easier. Then all I'm looking at is like 20 pages of notes. Okay. And then again, you can track it by scenario. There's multiple ways you can create as a repeat writer, multiple ways you can create in your planning. There's lots of things you can do analyzing how you did last year. You can look at how you can track how you performed in the last 4 to 5 weeks. You can track it by competency. Just there's multiple ways you can do that. And that's what I was talking about in planning. But you need to have this. These are the various scenarios they're going to throw at you. These were the mazes that I was talking to you guys about earlier. Now, this is a big one. Did you pay attention to the comments or requests of the partner? This is one of the key things. Every time in a case, I challenge anybody here. Okay, Stephen, your question was, I had this approach. Okay, can you elaborate a bit more? You had this approach on what? On like a specific scenario, are you talking about? So when you have, did you pay attention to any comments or requests by the partner? Anytime anybody from the client, user, anybody makes a comment, although even your partner, you have to pick up on that. For example, they'll say the controller, there's a new product that they have developed. The controller has gone through the IFRS or ASPE, whatever, and it qualifies for R&D, and we have capitalized it. A lot of people just assume it's true. That is begging you. It's begging you to go, because later on in the case, I guarantee you they're going to give you the breakdown of those costs, and you are going to have to go through them, apply the R&D criteria, and you will find at least all or some of it do not apply to be capitalized. So pay attention every time these things. Well, Stephen, I can always talk to you separately and help discuss it more. I will let you guys know how I can help you further. We can always have a discussion offline, Stephen, okay? About how you can format that document and use it. Okay, I see what you're trying to get at. I can give you examples of how to create that kind of document. Okay, so you have to. For me, that was the trick. When I wrote the UFI, I just kept, like it just never clicked until one day I just said, you know what? This is one of the main things I have to pay attention to. And my day two case was that. The CEO said cash flow was the most important thing to him. Just one line on page 1, hidden away. And my whole analysis out of the 4-hour exam, 2 hours of my writing. Well, I'd have to find a document to give an example in a particular case, guys. Okay. So I'll be more than happy to find a way to communicate with all of y'all. I'll discuss this at the end, okay? But oh, that's all it gave, one line. And then I read the rest of the case from that an angle, focus on the cash flow, and bang on right then and there for 2 hours out of the two 2.5 hours of writing time. I did that. I gambled. I didn't gamble. I knew that my day two case, well, at that time it was a day one case. That's what it is. And I nailed it. But that was, I mean, number one, case writing, I was much stronger at case writing than technical. And number two, case writing just came a lot easier to me. Some people it just does. Some people it doesn't. Some people are very good technically. Okay. The other thing is also stay within your role and required. We talked about that, like the IPO or whatever, or also within that. That's the details of the role. But your main role is, we talked about the audit planning. Are you at the beginning or at the end of the audit? Right. And then we talked about, don't just go and dump generic points. Don't feel you have to, because you're not going to get any credit for it. So ask yourself, can I save time there? And somewhere else where I might potentially get RC, can I boost my RC to a C? It's that simple. Well, I'm saying it is simple because it has happened to me. When I wrote the UFI, my day two was my first question was a 25 mark tax question. I read it. I had no freaking idea what to do. I had two options: twiddle my thumbs and try to figure it out, or guess what? Apply that 1 hour to the rest of the three questions. And that's what I did. And I walked out with a decile 3 on that day. So, you know, made good use of my time. So you got to make these choices, and it's going to happen. Then we talked about the scenarios. As you write more cases, you see more of these recurring situations, scenarios. Okay. And then you will write them down on your little cheat sheet or whatever. And then you will refine your responses accordingly. Again, some people, okay, failed in assurance or whatever. Okay. And some people have problems in procedures. There are a lot of older UFI cases. For example, we track UFI cases by competency, going back to 2008 or whatever. So if somebody wanted something based in finance or assurance, I would give them that UFI case, those UFI cases. Okay. And then you don't have to rewrite that whole case. You basically just focus on that. That's another method of studying. That's what I used to do. When I wrote the UFI, I never had much audit practice. So I picked older UFI questions, and I specifically picked assurance ones for planning or procedures and stuff like that. And I just did those parts. I just wrote them down on paper, whether I could get them or not. Okay. Now, this was the cheat sheet, what I was talking about. And this is just partial. Okay. You can add more, pull out more, depends. Yeah. So finding, yes, it is the key. Yes, I will explain how to interpret the. You're talking about deciles for level 1? Yes, I will explain that. Okay, I'll explain the deciles right now. So, I mean, people understand how, failure on level 2 level 2, 3, or 4. Level 1 is basically what they do is they take your raw mark. So they take all the assessment opportunities on day 2 and day 3. I'm just, it's a hypothetical, and I'm making this, you know, uh, kind of simplistic. Let us say every RC is worth 2 and every C is worth 4. They will add them up for all the EOs on day 2 and day 3. So let us say that, there's 13 on day 1 and there's 27 on day 2 for the sake of it. So there's 40 of them times 4, which is maximum. So 160 is the maximum if you aced every EO. And they will turn around and say, okay, based on everybody that wrote, it looks like, we want to have a pass between 60-65%. And based on, level 2, 3, 4, all of those, they have their own internal stuff. 80 is a good raw mark to pass level 1. Okay. So now that they've determined 80, let's say they determine 80 or 82 or 78 or whatever. Now, if 80 is a pass and you got a 78, that's probably fail level 1, decile 1. 76 would be fail level 1, decile 2. 74 would be decile 3, and so on. That's a simplistic way. Now, my numbers may be off, but that's kind of the pattern that they talk about. Okay. And I'm sure they do. It's probably something similar for capstone, for the day 1 case. So when you create your own little cheat sheet, okay, again, we talked about 1 or 2, identifying the required user role. What are my technical weaknesses, case writing weaknesses, okay, and any other specific notes or scenarios or big pictures I need to address. All right. Some of the notes about PrepFormula. When you start off, you start off with a specific study plan, and then from there you kind of tweak it as you go along. You'll tweak it at your end. We tweak it at our end, in the sense we will always constantly provide you. So is it really an assessment of level 1? Yeah. So the decile ranking will, for level 1, the decile ranking tells you how close you came to passing the raw mark. So if you were at 9, you were pretty far away. If you were at 1, you were very close. So I'll answer your question too, Norman. One-on-one coaching and marking. Okay, so we do the study plan, and the study plan will change. And based on your needs, we have these webinars. So we'll have, every month we'll have a webinar on, say, assurance procedures or assurance or FR or management or finance or tax. These are technical 2-hour webinars. Some of them cost money because we get a professional to come in. They're like 25, 30 bucks. Some of them are free, like this one. Then we also augment it by other things, which will be, at any given time, people always call us and say, I'm having trouble with tax or this or that. And we find ways of getting them more notes. We don't have a book for technical. We have a database. It's online, which covers all the technical. Yes. And we have, it covers it to a certain depth, because not everybody needs it to be at a certain level. Okay. And the big difference, and so if you want stuff more in depth besides what you see on our website, then we can provide you with more in-depth material. Okay. What's the main difference between PrepFormula and Densmore? I'm not gonna talk about Bruce. I mean, I know Bruce from my days at EY. Um, no, not every webinar is free because these webinars are above and beyond. What I can tell you, Mary, is what PrepFormula will provide you. I won't go into the difference between Bruce and I. One is the study plan, one is the webinars, okay? And the main thing is the one-on-one coaching and the marking. The level of marking that you will get, okay, and the professionalism is of a very high standard. Again, we are all professionals and we all kind of know that not everybody is in sync with students. So a lot of times, if a student feels that they would prefer a different trainer, right away we change that, make them more comfortable. Okay, and there are times and I will going to one of the other screens here. For example, last summer we had between capstone 1 and 2, we had an intensive 7-session program, okay, where basically we went through something similar like this. This was what you're looking here for item number 2. We did it in July for all our CFE writers. And what we did is, so we did a blend of case writing and we did a blend of technicals for their benefit. Okay, and you start working, and once you register, you have access to everything till you pass. Okay, what you would pay additionally for would be if there are any specific webinars that are above and beyond. And with each package, different packages you can look up on the website. If you buy certain credits, meaning certain one-on-one, X number of one-on-one sessions, once you exhaust those, you can buy more with the trainer. Okay, so Meena, the number of cases you mark depends on the package you buy. Some packages come with 6, some come with 14. It depends on how many you want to buy. All right, so Mike, who ran the first session, he can customize it to whatever you want. Okay, and this one is, so basically the other thing, Mary, to answer your question, is students have an option to work with a qualified practicing CPA one-on-one. That's one of the key things. Okay, and you're provided with all the materials you want. We have our own cases, X number of our own cases, and then we also have a whole database of other cases. So as we study, normally this is how it would work, is you, let us say when you start, we do your study plan, your technical study plan. And then if I'm your trainer, let's say, I would make you write your first case with me. And then we'd kind of debrief it. And then we'd come up with, okay, here are your strengths, your weaknesses. Okay, do we need to do a second one before you do a couple on your own? Yes or no? Yes. Okay, we do a second one. And now we've come up with a good idea of what you need to work on. And I would provide you with some of other documents on how to read plan outline, how to debrief, blah, blah, blah. And then I will give you 2 or 3 cases to practice on your own. And those cases we will decide together based on your needs, what they have to be. Okay. And then sometimes students themselves will request, I want something more focused in finance, and we mix it up as we go. So it kind of paces itself. Okay. Yes, Bhavin, it's whatever is still remaining, you can use it. Do you have a plan for 2017 day one writer specifically? Yeah, we do. Yeah, it was discussed. It was discussed in the part one webinar. Yeah. Okay. Were there a couple of other questions that I missed? I think there were a couple. Somebody asked me about what they should, whether when they should start doing stuff. Well, the whole thing is you want to start planning in January, by January. You know, what is my the next 8 months going to look like from all aspects? My technical studying, my case writing studying, my work life balance. You know, am I going to get 3 weeks off? That is a key thing. A lot of you probably fail because you did not get those 3 weeks off before the CFE, whereas the big firms gave all their students, 4 or 5 weeks off. And I know that. And that's one of my biggest beefs with CPA Canada. Because, I mean, you guys are just one or two students in industry at your firm, and you're at a massive disadvantage. So, again, you want to try and take that, whether it's paid or unpaid. But you want to try and, so from now, you start working on that plan. And then there are other things you can specifically start working on. What do you can go back and look at how you did leading up to the exam last year. And then there are certain things you can see consistencies, areas where you went wrong. In day 2 and day 3, I passed level 2, 3, and 4, but I failed level 1 sufficiency. That's how. Well, based on this, you probably either ran out of time, or if somebody got a result like this person, they ran level 1, they failed only level 1, they might have probably ran out of time, or they did not address enough assessment opportunities to get enough raw marks to get above that raw threshold, potentially. So it could be speed of typing, speed of reading, time management, those kind of things. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is yeah, that's probably true, Mary. That's probably true, Mary. Well, if you fail level 2, Norman, depends if you fail FR or management, because I think FR is more on day 2 and management is more on day 3. Now, the other thing is my email address. I don't know if it is up there or not. Okay, sorry, it's on the next slide. Oh, sorry, there's one more. There's another. Okay, so um, sorry, Mike's kind of here with me, helping me answer some of your questions. Um, what if you fail level 2 only? So yeah, that's what I said. You probably fail FR or management. You fail both. Yeah, so you had a rough day 2 and day 3 partially, because there would have probably been 5 or 6 FRs on day 2, and then there would have been the bulk of management on day 3. So what else you would get out of this is, your dedicated mentor, um, your one-on-one sessions, which to me, that is the absolute key. Because the other one, that is like the central piece. If you draw a wheel, that person is standing in the middle, helping you bring all the technical, the webinars, what technical you need to study, what webinars you should or shouldn't attend. I tell all my students, ask me before you want to attend a webinar. Do not even spend $25 on the webinar if you don't have to. Okay, then we have some note videos, other technical materials on there. We also talk to students when they need guidance. we can't do a lot on Capstone 1 because of the rules, but on Capstone 2, um, there's a pass guarantee that you basically have access to all our stuff on the web, all the questions, all of that ongoing till you pass the CFE. Okay. Um, and the 790, there's two, 797 or 1197. You can visit PrepFormula, and prices will probably go up in January. Okay. Um, and okay, so I will also answer questions, but since some of you wanted certain things or whatever, even if, I mean, I do this for my students, and we do this for all our students that did not pass, is look at their results and I help them, guide them. Okay. Um, I'm more than happy. A lot of y'all probably joined by going through my blog. Some of y'all went through whatever the prep email list or whatever. I am more than happy if you email me. Okay. I am more than happy. You can email me at tauzer.dalal at prepformula.com or at gmail.com. Send me your results. I'm more than happy to help you. I'll explain how credits work. I'm more than happy to look at your results or to talk you through how prep works, or especially how your results, to interpret your results. The key thing is you want to ensure that what your needs are, these are my weaknesses, this is what I need to pass next year. You need to figure that out. And if you need somebody's help to figure that out, I'm willing to help you. And then if prep fits, which a lot of times it should fit, then it's right for you. If it doesn't, in some cases it may not, you know, and I honestly tell students, it's probably not for you, but that's only for a small percentage. For most of them, the one-on-one is the way to go because that helps mitigate a lot of stuff we talked about. Okay. Also, you can email Mike, and he's happy to get in a whole mike.katzivman, and he's happy at prepformula.com, and he'd be happy to talk about whatever you want. How do the credits work? So the 797 comes with 6 credits, and the 1197 comes with 14 credits. And what each credit is basically each credit entitles you to essentially 1 hour with the trainer. That 1 hour will be you write a case, that you send it in for marking. I mark it, I flip it back to you. That's 1 credit. And then we spend a 1 hour Skype session roughly in going over it, debriefing it. So that uses up 2 credits. So that's 7 day 3 cases essentially. Okay. And most students will pick the 14 credits, and that's more than sufficient for them to get through to till the end of the CFE. A lot of them will use half of them up till probably May, and then a lot of them will use the other half August, September, is what I find. Okay. When is phase 3 of the webinar? Monday. Okay.
We're going to move it to Monday. We initially thought the weekend, but we're going to
Yeah.
move it Monday.
Okay. It'll be on Monday.
There's going to be more information.
And more info will come out. Okay. And you can always look up on the prep website under the Learn tab, and it'll have that. And a replay link will automatically be sent to you. So if any of y'all have any questions or whatever, you want me to take a look at it, you can fire off your results to me, but be specific on what you want me to look at. Or if you have questions about prep or whatever. Okay. Or you just want help in general, I'm happy to do that. Does anybody have any other questions? Just remember, give me some time because I already have about 20, 25 people I got to get back to. But I will reply to you, and I will set up a time to discuss your results with you. The cases that will be marked some of them are from prep that we recommend. but you also have the option of choosing cases that you want. When will that $75 webinar be that Mike talked about in webinar one?
Oh, the one for the new capstone one case is going to be in September of 2017. The one for PRI is available now for $75 if they just email education or support.
Okay, so Mary, it's the new one for 2017 will happen closer to the exam. Uh, but the one for PRI, if you want a replay of it, you can send it to an email to education@prepformula.com requesting it. Deep, can we? Yes, you can select your own cases as long as they're UFI or prep. But if they are like, pass or Densmore or stuff, then we won't uh, generally do that. Okay, but most likely most likely there are specific cases that we pick, and for a reason. And what I like to do is I tell people why I pick specific cases. All right, so it helps them. I mean, I always keep them informed of what I'm picking and why for their particular elective. All right. Does any other? I'll hang around for a couple of minutes if people have other questions. Yes, Smita, that's the whole idea is what we do cases on your weaknesses. So we do a couple of cases to figure out your weaknesses and then help you with that, give you ideas on how to work with them, and then give you a couple to do, two or three to do on your own. And then you come back and you do one with me. And then again, you go and do two, three on your own. And then all the while together, we pick the cases together that you do on your own. And if you want to do even more than that, you can do that. Do I live? Oh, sorry. Mina's asking somebody else a question. Hey, Mina, sorry, Bhavin, you're getting a date there, buddy. Also, if somebody wants, I can actually give them a demo of the prep website. Iskander, your question is, are the cases be based on results, meaning your 2016 results? Yeah, definitely. We would focus on areas of weakness where you did not pass. But one thing I want you to take away, Mina, no, I'm just kidding. I know you're looking for a study partner. Um, although Bhavin is a really good looking guy. Um, but sorry, Iskander, um, what I want everybody to take out of this is that regardless of the fact that you may have failed, which, you know, that's just a blunt term, look at the positives of everything that you managed to do well in. Some people started in July, some people had language issues, they just came to this country, whatever. Some people passed level 2, level 4. So that in itself is an achievement. Think of it as it's a 2-step process and you've conquered the first step. Look at it positively. That's the only way you can. Okay. So regardless of what happens, I wish you guys all the very best. And I really hope your name appears next December or whenever they announce results. And you can email myself or Mike. Okay. And I guess Mike's doing the third part of the webinar. I don't know if I'm doing it. I don't know. I haven't been told yet. But either way, it should be very informative. Okay. So have a great night, and feel free to email me. Thank you. Yeah.